Emily Dickinson's poem "Because I Could Not Stop for Death" was composed around 1863. The poem is made of 6 quatrains or 4-line stanzas. Like many of Dickinson's poems, this one uses a traditional meter, often found in hymns and nursery rhymes, called common meter. The poem's lines are arranged in iambs, two-syllable segments or metrical feet, in which the first syllable is unstressed and the second syllable is stressed. Let's see the summary of the poem. The first 2 lines. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. In these lines, death is personified or described in terms of human characteristics. Whether death takes old man or grim reaper or a ferryman, his visit is almost never welcomed by the poor mortal who finds him at the door. Such is not the case in this poem. Figuratively speaking, the poem is about one woman's date with death. Dickinson uses the personification of death as a metaphor throughout the poem. Death is a gentleman, perhaps handsome and well groomed, who makes a call at the home of a naive young woman. The poem begins with a comment upon death's politeness, though he surprises the woman with his visit. Knowing that the woman has been keeping herself too busy in her daily life to remember death, he kindly comes by to get her. While most people would try to bar the door once they recognized his identity, it flattered to find herself in even this gentleman's favor. Line 3 and 4. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. It would have been shocking for a young, unmarried 19th century woman to take a carriage ride alone with a strange gentleman. In this instance, a chaperone named Immortality rides with them. This is another example of Emily Dickinson's use of personification. Though the poem's speaker offers no description of a looking little woman in a grey dress, the poem's speaker hardly notices immortality's presence beyond a brief mention in line 4. The young woman's attention is still focused on death, her gentleman caller. Line 5. We slowly drove. Line 5. We slowly drove. He knew no haste. There are many possible explanations for the slow speed with which death drives the carriage. Perhaps since the woman is now dead, the carriage has been transformed into a hearse or in a funeral procession. Another possible explanation is that death has no concept of time. Time and space are earthly concerns, and death, courier of souls from this world to the unknown, is not bound by such vague human concepts. Line 6 to 8. And I had put away my labor and my leisure too, for his civility. People spend much of their lives keeping busy with work or amused with play, so that death. The poem's speaker seems to be no exception. However, she admits that she was willing to put aside her distractions and go with death, perhaps because she found him so surprisingly charming. She comments upon his civility or formal politeness. She appears to be seduced by his good manners. If she had any expectations about death, he has certainly exceeded them. Lines 9 to 12. We pass in the ring. We pass the fields of gazing grain. We pass the setting sun. This quatrain is rich with imagery. Death's passenger does not seem as concerned with where they are going as she does with the scenery along the way. In spite of the fact that she put away her labor and leisure in the previous quadrant, she is still distracted by things of the mortal world. It is possible that she knows she is seeing the last of these things which are so common that she may not have noticed them before. Children playing, wheat growing, the sun setting. Taken for granted in the daily grind of life, these things grow more meaningful in relation to this final journey. The children are playing in a ring and ring significance for human beings because they are a symbol of eternity. The grain represents the natural world as she knows it, only this time the grain seems to be gazing at her or looking at her with great interest. The setting sun is the universal clock, the thing by which humans measure their lives on earth. As they pass it by, she seems to pass into a new dimension. Lines 13 to 16. Or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill. For only my gown, my tippet, only tulle. Here again we see, as in line 5, that death has no concept of time or earthly concerns. It is the sun that is moving. He passed us, indicating the passage of time by its daily course across the sky. The carriage here seems to be going so slowly as to be nearly motionless. The night appears to be falling and a chilly dew is setting in. The references to the thinness of the woman's clothing, her gossamer gown and her tulle tippet or cap, another reminder that she is now dead. Lines 17 to 20. We passed before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. This house is a grave, even though the speaker uses an euphemism to describe it. This is where her body will be housed while her soul journeys onward. She describes the house as a swelling of the ground, clearly an image of a fresh burial plot. And the cornice or ornamental molding near the roof line is only just visible above the pile of earth. She does not describe how long they passed there, but it could not have been long. This seems to be just a way station, though the woman does not seem to know it at this point. Her destination is still a mystery. Lines 21 and 22. Since then, it is centuries and yet feels shorter than the day. These lines contain an excellent example of hyperbole, an intentional exaggeration or overstatement that is not meant to be taken literally. Naturally, centuries are longer than a single day. However, some great moments in human life seem longer than they are, and moments of great revelation seem to stretch out forever. The greatest revelation of all must be the moment when the mystery of death and the afterlife is revealed. Also, perhaps because that day was the last day that the woman experienced the temporal or time-related world, the memory of it is the last remnant of her previous existence. Lines 23 and 24. I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. Sometimes the poetic experience is the closest thing to knowing the unknowable. In these final lines, Dickinson has attempted to describe what no living human can know. That moment, the meaning of forever becomes clear. There is no bolt of lightning or clap of thunder. Dickinson uses the word surmised, meaning that the woman guesses through intuition the answer to the riddle of human existence. She looks at the heads of the horses and sees that they are pointed toward eternity. And suddenly she remembers that immortality has been sitting beside her all along. The structure of this poem is linear, occurring in straight line from where the carriage stops for the speaker to a place and time that are far away. The images that describe what is seen in the carriage ride all suggest that life is a cycle, that the cradle to grave motion does not fire us out into a shoot out of a cannon, but instead brings us back to where we started from. The most obvious example of this is the children playing in a ring. Not only is the ring symbolic of an endless circle, but the fact that one sees children testing their strength indicates that the dying speaker has come back to where he or she came from. Fields of grain reminds us of the cycle of life because they repeat the whole motion year after year, from planting to harvesting. The setting sun indicates the start of a house is linked to its completion and eventual destruction by mentioning both its highest peak, cornice, and its beginning, wound together. The whole poem takes on a circular pattern by bringing us back in the last stanza to where we were in the first. Critics have questioned this technique, wondering if it is really necessary to Dickinson's point or if she ended this way for aesthetic purposes to give the poem a big finish. In light of the cyclical nature of most of the poem, I want to loop eternity back upon itself from centuries later back to the moment that eternity started for her. Death is one of the main themes covered by this poem. But the treatment that Dickinson gives the subject is worth taking a close look at. Many poets have personified comes to take us away, often as grim reaper who cuts down lives with his scythe, the way that a reaper cuts down crops that are ready to harvest. Death has also been portrayed at times as a gentleman, probably because a smiling menace is somehow more frightening than a menace that is self-conscious about inflicting pain. In this poem, death is a gentleman, but Dickinson carries the metaphor through to its next logical step and holds death responsible for following the rules of courtship and calling for a lady would have to follow. He cannot just come and take her, but a third party, immortality, must come along and chaperone their ride to make sure that death does not do anything improper. Death cannot rush, but has to drive slowly, because he is not simply in the business of grabbing souls, he has taste and sensibility. One reason for why death is so bound by formal manners in this poem could be that Dickinson does not want to portray death as being all powerful, as other poets have feared. Because of Dickinson's religious belief in immortal life, the significance of death itself is diminished. It is as powerless in this situation as the person who is being carried away and as trapped by manners as the dying or by biology. The key in this poem is how time passes at a different pace under different circumstances. The second stanza points out how slowly death's carriage progresses while taking the speaker away. The stated reason for this lagging is if there are proper rules of etiquette regarding how one is taken into the afterlife. The tour around town that takes place so slowly could be based upon the old superstition about one's entire life flashing before one's eyes at the instant of dying. On the other hand, it could be Dickinson's way of showing that death is a comfort and that it is as much a part of life as all of the other things that are observed. After death, the flow of time changes for the poem's speaker. While a moment once revealed things that would have taken see, centuries now feel shorter than a day. We are not told what the experience of eternity is like, what one sees or hears or feels there, and this could account for the way that time seems Dickinson is making a statement about the nature of the physical world, how it captures our attention, and how giving out attention takes more time than the nothingness of eternal life. At the end, the speaker is several centuries away from the moment of death, but with nothing in the eternal realm to distract her attention, she can look back on the physical world with a clean line of sight. She can observe her spent life as clearly as we can see the light of a star burned out ages ago that has traveled to us through empty